From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Welcome to a special edition Sox Machine Live. I am Josh Nelson from Sox Machine, and also joining me is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. Welcome, as again, this is a special edition of Sox Machine Live, as it is Monday, August 7th, around 3:15 p.m. Central Time, as we are streaming this live on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. And for those that are listening on the podcast, the audio recording, you'll get this after the live stream. There's a lot to discuss. After we recorded last night's episode that covered the brouhaha in Cleveland between Tim Anderson and Jose Ramirez and the White Sox and the Guardians, there was a pretty big bombshell report from Jesse Rogers of ESPN regarding comments from Keenan Middleton, who now plays the New York Yankees after being traded at the deadline by the Chicago White Sox, about what's going on within the White Sox clubhouse. So there's that we'll talk about. There's even more to discuss as things are starting to unravel inside the Chicago White Sox clubhouse. But we did get this breaking news not that long ago, Jim, as far as the result of the fighting between Tim Anderson and Jose Ramirez. Tim Anderson has now been suspended for 6 games. Jose Ramirez has gotten a 3-game suspension, and then Guardians closer Emmanuel Clase has been suspended for a game. There's been a lot of questions on why Anderson is getting a longer suspension than Jose Ramirez. This is the 3rd suspension for Tim Anderson due to a physical altercation. Twice with umpires, this time with a player. Actually, I take that back. Is it 3 or 4? Didn't he get suspended for Brad Keller? I don't think that was a physical altercation. That was something that he said, correct?
That was verbal, yeah.
Verbal, yeah. So
we can
one verbal, 3 physical.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so 1 verbal, 3 physical altercations for Tim Anderson, and that is why Tim Anderson has the lengthier suspension. So let's go again. There's so much that's going on, and I'm sure if I wait 5 more minutes, Jim, something else will come up regarding what is happening on 35th and Shields. Let's talk about the suspension for Tim Anderson. Fair, not fair. I'm assuming that he will appeal the suspension, and I haven't seen a lineup card yet for tonight's game against the New York Yankees, but I'm half expecting him to appeal the suspension and be in the lineup tonight.
Yeah, well, when it comes to news coming in, I think it was Bruce Lamine who said that the Rick Hahn will be discussing everything in like 30 minutes. Pedro Grifol will be speaking as well, so I think we have a little bit of time to discuss everything currently that is broken since we recorded last podcast. But yeah, when it comes to Anderson's suspension, like I thought it could have been more, like maybe like 7 or 8 games, maybe even upwards of 10, with like Ramirez getting a corresponding suspension. Like I could see him getting like half, like 6-3, 7-4, 9-5, 9-6, something like that. So like 6 feels fine. I wonder, watching Anderson tweet through it last night, if he like would appeal to try to get more games. Just like, let my season be over with, please. Just, 45 game suspension. I'll take that, please, just to, be done and go home. Like just get basically, suspended or expelled from the league for the rest of the year, just to, go into solitude for a little bit, go on like a spiritual quest or something, because it's really been rough for him. Like reading those tweets, like I mentioned on our show yesterday or last night, this morning's show, that I always expect to not understand what Anderson's referring to, because he speaks in kind of in a circumspect way, and like I don't, we don't probably share the same frame of reference, but like even then, like a lot of people are just looking and saying like, man, why is he doing this?
Yeah, and to Jim's point, as he did mention in this comment from TJ March, very excited to hear Josh and Jim break down Hahn and Pedro talking to the media live. I'm curious on how, if it's even going to be broadcast at an NBC Sports Chicago, It's a little early as far as the pregame. Typically, they record it and then they play it during the pregame show. The White Sox, they don't stream it live from their account like other professional sports teams do. Very handy, by the way. As a San Francisco 49ers fan, I like that they stream all of their press conferences, and I think the Chicago Bears do. I think even the Chicago Bulls as well stream their press conferences live. So it's
Anderson is in tonight's lineup.
He is in the lineup. Okay, yep, excellent.
He is appealing.
So Anderson is appealing, and then we'll see. I mean, if he even wins the appeal, he may get a game knocked off. But, the questions again, why does Tim Anderson have twice the suspension as Jose Ramirez? It's because this is the third physical altercation suspension for Tim Anderson, twice with umpires, now with another player. So they're going to continue to tack on these lengthier suspensions for Tim Anderson as it continues happening from the commissioner's office. But Jose Ramirez was not the only person that Tim Anderson has recently fought. Shane Reardon, the executive producer of Parkins and Spiegel on 670 The Score, and that show is currently on right now. They are weekdays from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., shared a story from a trusted source on air that on July 9th, Sunday, the game between the White Sox and the Cardinals, Yasmani Grandal was not in the lineup, according to Shane Reardon, and was a little upset that he wasn't in the lineup. So if he's not in the lineup, he wanted to head to the All-Star break early, and he got that declined. Tim Anderson made an offhand comment while Tim Anderson is taking an ice bath, so you could create this visual for yourself on how this setting is. Whatever Anderson said to Grandal upset Grandal so much that he slapped Tim Anderson, and the two got into a physical altercation with Tim Anderson, I'm assuming, leaping out of the ice bath. So again, you could create this visual for yourself and what is happening between Grandal and Anderson before Sunday's game and before the All-Star break. So he's fighting Jose Ramirez. There's a fight in the clubhouse between Anderson and Grandal. Jim, this is 2016 all over again, buddy. Like,
sure,
we're well equipped to talk about this situation because this is not the first time we've talked about
Frazier,
it.
Adam Eaton all over again. Yeah, I mean, can you slap a guy in a tub? Like, that was my first question. Just like,
yes.
Feels like that's kind of against decorum or code. Like a guy sitting in submerged in water just, seems like a sitting target. You feel like you should ask him to get out of the tub and take it outside, rather than have somebody sitting in a container, basically, having the low ground when, if this story is 100% true, and, maybe it's possible that, it needs a second source to make sure that, one side isn't setting the agenda, but like Grandal would be theoretically in the wrong for wanting to bail on a team early before everybody else does. So if you make that request, you should be prepared to be unpopular for it. Like if you're just kind of cashing in, you would think if you're saying I've stopped caring about this team, then you wouldn't necessarily be offended by the feedback you receive for expressing not caring. You would think well, I don't care about today's win and loss. I don't care about the way the rest of the season goes. So I'm not going to care about Tim Anderson's reaction to my request because I've checked out. So to have him be checked out in one regard, but still, feel like he has to defend his honor in another, I find strange. But yeah, I think now now this will invite another layer to the retrospective of Yasmani Grandal's career and the free agent contract and the White Sox decision to make him the centerpiece of their position player plans, as this all unravels.
Yeah. We haven't even got to the Middleton report yet, and this is already, there's so much to unwind and unravel and unpeel. Our friend Beefloaf made a comment in the YouTube that it's not cool to slap someone in the cold tub. Next time I see you, bud, and you are sitting in the cold tub not getting out, I'm going to slap you in the face. I'm just like this image. I can see White Sox fans taking this seriously and be like, why are the two-star players fighting in the clubhouse? But now this is just comedy. especially with what Keenan Middleton told Jesse Rogers of ESPN.com late last night. And the last thing I'll touch on is the Anderson and Grandal fight. This makes sense to when Bob Nightingale tweeted that the White Sox would be willing to give Yasmani Grandal away before the trade deadline. That makes sense now, why they'd be so willing to move him, and nobody took him. So now I can see the drumbeat getting louder as we continue into August, Jim, and maybe September, that if things are not working out well, if Sebi Zavala does get healthier, if Corey Lee gets healthier, maybe we could see that Yasmani Grandal TFA sooner than later, if it's still going to ruffle some feathers in the clubhouse. So again, thank you to everyone that just joined. I see we have more people that have hopped in. I'm Josh Nelson alongside Jim Margulis. We are Sox Machine. Again, if you did not see the breaking news, Tim Anderson has been suspended for 6 games. He, through multiple sources, will be appealing that suspension. So we'll see if it gets shortened, but he is expected to be in the lineup today against the New York Yankees, in which Garrett Cole will be starting that game for the Yankees, and Dylan Cease will be starting for the Chicago White Sox. And if you just joined, Tim Anderson and Yasmani Grandal fought in the tub room in the clubhouse. I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh. Like, this is just ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, we can finally now talk about the Keenan Middleton report, which was the whole idea that we were going to talk about. And again, Rick Hahn and Pedro Grifol are expected to speak around 3:45, 3:50. So if we get anything on Twitter, we'll have some instant reactions. We don't expect that to be broadcasted or streamed. There's a lot to discuss for both of them. But with the Middleton report, Jim, it's a very damning report. And it paints this picture of Pedro Grifol's clubhouse that to Middleton, there are no rules. You have a rookie pitcher, which easy to figure out who it is, that's taking naps during games in the bullpen. You have pitchers not participating in fielding practice. And it sounds like, according to Middleton, even though that may be a little chaotic, that the pitchers are more organized than the position players. And the Anderson and Grandal fight might give credence to that perspective from a pitcher. We texted a lot when this report broke yesterday, Jim, last night. After sleeping on it, after writing about it, how do you feel about this Keenan Middleton report? What does it say about the White Sox? And any guesses on what Rick Hahn could possibly say in a few minutes?
Well, Lance Lynn on AJ Pierzynski's show said like that Middleton wasn't wrong. So there you have like another source on the record, maybe not corroborating all the details, but saying like, nope, he's not gone rogue, apparently. Like, he is speaking out, but yeah, it's not a case of just like the Dallas Keuchel thing from a couple years ago when he was DFA'd, and the White Sox, Liam Hendricks especially is kind of in the forefront of saying like, that Keuchel was a source and like he didn't represent the case. And you've kind of been able to piece it together over the course of years, like with Hendricks saying they need an authoritarian, and just Keuchel even going back to him and saying like there were cliques, there wasn't any kind of strong cohesion in the clubhouse and leadership. Like, you can trace a through line from the last couple of years, especially when things started to go south and like La Russa really wasn't much of a presence because of his illness. That none of this is shocking. I think the only thing that's surprising is like Middleton being like, yeah, I'll say everything. Like, I won't name names, but I'll be very specific about what I'm saying.
Right.
In fact, like, everybody seems to be drawing the connection to like Gregory Santos as like the rookie sleeping in the bullpen, if only because like Santos has been like the only rookie who's been there long enough to feel like, Tanner Banks was up and down, some other guys have like popped in and out, Nick Padilla and such, but like Santos would be like the only one who's been like a rookie and around long enough to like rack up multiple infractions and really get on somebody's nerves. But, so if you can draw that connection, if not, that's unfair to Santos. Like, if he just happens to be catching a stray because he fits a description, but is not actually the guy, then, here's hoping that's, amended in some regard to, correct for that. So he doesn't have that kind of, thing attached to his reputation because he's had a good season otherwise. Like among guys who need to hear about among guys who need to who have to hear about the 2023 they've had, Santos is not one of them. So here's hoping that, if that isn't true, then somebody steps up to correct that record. When it comes to just Middleton himself delivering it, like, it is a little bit surprising since he's not established, since he will be a free agent. Like, maybe you don't want to go into free agency being like, he'll be a guy who turns on your team at the first possible moment. On the other hand, it does fit within his reputation. Like, remember in May when he struck out Carlos Correa and was all fired up about it. Then after the game, it's like, I was happy to strike him out. He's a cheater. Like, he's been very blunt before. And White Sox fans were happy to hear it when, he was calling out somebody else for, a lack of conduct. And so I guess it is, based on what we know from the small amount of time that we've known Middleton, you can start kind of painting a profile of a guy who will call it as he sees it as soon as he can see it. In this case, it doesn't make sense to pull the pin on the grenade when you're standing right next to it. But if you've found some safe haven in the Yankees clubhouse and you say all right, yeah, I can finally, if somebody asks, I'll say something, and somebody asks, and he certainly said something.
What makes this fascinating, to your point, Jim, is just how candid Middleton was, and he's back in town.
Yeah,
he's with the Yankees.
Yeah,
Middleton is at Guarantee Rate Field. Everyone, I assume, has seen it.
When he comes in, are fans gonna be fired up for him? It's entirely possible. It could be very strange. I want to watch it. Are you going to the games? Are you going to all three games?
Yeah, I'm going to be there tonight. So we're in section 108. So if you do go to tonight's game, stop by and say hi. We're not that far away from the visitors' bullpen. So we'll see Middleton if he does enter the game. And yeah, I could see some White Sox fans standing up and cheering for him, and be really confusing for some Sox fans that have no idea why they're cheering on this Yankees reliever to enter the game, but I could see it happening.
Yeah, or if he strikes somebody out or comes back to the dugout after a scoreless inning, I'm fascinated by the dynamic because I think, given that the only thing that could possibly change this, and I'm not even optimistic that anything will change for the way the White Sox are run, but severe national embarrassment like this, one after another, just losses piling up and just nobody in control. And even Rick Hahn, who was saying we've had people not responding to adversity this season. Well, and you can probably take into account Grandal might be one of the guys who's responding to the adversity of the season or is just kind of checked out. Yeah, sure. But this is, you can't figure out how to run an organization. You can't figure out how to establish a hierarchy. Kenny Williams can't. Basically, ever since Ozzie and Kenny started fighting, there hasn't been any kind of rudder on it. And I've seen people well, Ozzie could fix this. No, Ozzie can't fix this. He's a product of a broken environment. And when he went to Miami, he showed that when you have expectations and people aren't used to the environment you came from, and people don't have a pre-existing relationship with you, you have a hard time meeting them because you just are not conditioned to meet standard baseball expectations. So it's really it's a mess. And and it can only be traced to the top now.
Well, yeah, going back to 2016, though, and reliving L'Affaire LaRoche, Hahn was absent, and I vividly recall you and I hammering that point. You're the White Sox GM. You signed this guy. Why is this a Kenny Williams versus the White Sox clubhouse moment? Where is the GM? And conveniently, Hahn hid from that. He could not hide from the Chris Sale incident that would happen later that season. I guess that's the only thing we're missing, where we haven't seen anyone cut up uniforms or anything yet. So that's been the difference. Give it time. Yeah, it's just August. We still got 6 more weeks of the season left to go. But yeah, to your point, Jim, Hahn is either very hands-off in what happens to the clubhouse, so much that whoever's managing for the White Sox has ultimate power, ultimate authority that's going on in the clubhouse. And that may answer some questions that we've had on what has been happening the last couple of years, because when you combine Tony La Russa's deteriorating health And Pedro Grifol, a brand new manager, this is where things are just unraveling very quickly, and there is no order. And it's either that, or to your point, Hahn has no idea how to run an organization. He is 10 years into this role, and he was an assistant GM for another decade. So I am one to lean towards there's no way he doesn't know how to run an organization. This man has an MBA from Kellogg, for crying out loud. He's got a Northwestern MBA. He should know on how to run an organization. He has that education. He's been part of this franchise for 20 years. Like, come on. At some point, yeah, not everything runs smoothly for the Chicago White Sox, but there were good years while Hahn was around. He should have learned a few things, what works and what doesn't work. So I am leaning towards he's so offhand approach and how he's handling this organization. And it also explains on how the Omar Vizquel stuff popped up out of nowhere. And yeah, what we're dealing with, what we are unraveling and watching right now in front of our eyes, a Chicago White Sox team that's so far to the race that that's not even part of the discussion. But you go from, on the trade deadline, saying with candor that the White Sox could still contend next year. A week later, your shortstop gets knocked out on the field by Jose Ramirez. He's suspended for 6 games for participating in that fight. And then like a day later, like 30 hours later, a former reliever exposes what is actually going on inside the clubhouse. And now more stories are coming out of the clubhouse about your prize free agent signing and that shortstop fighting in the clubhouse. I'm sure there'll be more. I'm sure as soon as you put a microphone, the LA media in front of Joe Kelly, I'm sure will have stories. Kendall Graveman was so happy that he returned to Houston after the trade. To your point in your column this morning, Jake Berger is happy that he's in Miami. I'm sure Lucas Giolito is thrilled to be in Anaheim. Like it's really disappointing that this is one of the sports teams that we root for, and this is the team that we cover. It's entertaining because of the chaos, but this is bad press, and there's so much organizational rot. And again, to your point, like it's all got to be gutted. It's all got to be removed if you're going to rebound from this. And I don't even know if Jerry Reinsdorf has the energy to rebound from this.
Yeah, like you need to put a tent over it and just, basically
fumigate it.
Fumigate it. Yeah.
Just, I can see it from the rooftop. Like,
just, big cloud of, chemicals go in there and just kill everything that was living. And
the guarantee rate logo now makes sense, by the way, with the down arrow. So you could just spray paint a big guarantee rate logo on the tent, fumigate guarantee rate field.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to like the Kenny Rick dynamic, it's just that they've been around for too long. Like, I've written about this before, is like every GM seems to get 5 years. And then if the first 5 years are a success, then they get another 5 years. And like Theo Epstein, like for example, had a great first 5 years. He got a second 5 years, not so good. Dave Dombrowski in Detroit, same thing, like great first 5 years, kind of created a mess with the second 5, couldn't figure his way out. The Tigers moved on. Kenny had a good first 5 years at the White Sox, won a World Series, got a second 5 years, things started falling apart. Like that should have been time to move on. Kind of happened with Hahn, who got a first 5 years. That didn't work out. They should have moved on. Like, but just that, they're not allowed to leave, or they just, either they decide to remove themselves and just won't, because when are they going to have that kind of, job security ever again if they go anywhere else? And you just have like two disparate personalities. I think you have Hahn, who is just very, hands off or political or diplomatic, or just, has kind of a vague idea of how to run a team, but just, isn't necessarily like a leader. And then you have Kenny, who is kind of turned into like a Will Ferrell character from SNL, like the bad boss at the editor at the newspaper In-Flight magazine, or the Wake Up and Smile host who fights the weatherman and like tears off his head and starts eating his neck. Like Kenny seems like he's that guy who just loves confrontation. Like when the LaRoche stuff happens, like, yeah, I'll go in there, I'll take off my shirt and just like get into a headbutting contest with whoever wants to take a run at him. Like that's kind of like how I interpret like his public persona. And like when he tells like reporters, like, I'm not very happy right now. Like, please ask me how mad I am. Please get mad at me. I want to fight you. Like that's kind of how it reminds me of. Like, and when you look at the whole organization, like underneath him and just, how it's kind of just gone, like, yeah, just they've been there and they can't leave, and it shouldn't. No, everybody recognizes at one level or another, whether it's front of mind, whether it's deep in their bones, whether it's after the fact when the season goes astray and they all kind of piece it together and like, oh, there's a sign that it wasn't working. Like everybody seems to understand that it doesn't work, and it won't work, and it can't work, and it's just fundamentally flawed. And until they go and just flush an organization and just bring in new leadership, Chris Getz is not the answer, by the way.
Correct.
Yeah,
I agree. He's not.
Yeah, just another former Royal, if nothing else. Like no former Royals involved right now. Like that's just how it feels like it's going to be. Like if Kenny and Rick stay, they'll bring in somebody else. It won't work. Either the talent management will be terrible, or they won't develop leaders, or they'll develop half of a leadership structure, and the cycle will repeat itself. Like Sal Perez, like I'm unequivocal in my just disdain for the idea, not because
he's going to fix everything, Jim. You're wrong. Yeah. Salvador Perez is going to fix everything.
Like just bringing in a clubhouse cop for Pedro Grifol, like seems like the perfect White Sox answer for how this will be fixed. It's not going to work.
I want to talk about Grifol here because, again, Grifol's going to speak to the media shortly. Rick Hahn is supposed to be speaking in a couple of minutes here. And again, when those quotes are coming in, we'll try to provide our live instant reactions. We hang out with you guys. And again, thank you guys so much for hopping into this live stream with us. We wanted to talk about this again. A lot of this breaking news happened after we recorded yesterday's podcast episode, which of course you could listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. This particular quote regarding Pedro Grifol before Grifol speaks, and this is something that Grifol has to speak to. Middleton said, quote, "We came in with no rules. I don't know how you police the culture if there are no rules or guidelines to follow because everyone is doing their own thing. Like, how do you say anything about it because there are no rules," end quote. And, Grifol, before the season, gave these really vague explanations of what culture is, and he keeps referring back to the 2014-2015 Kansas City Royals, even though he has far more experience in bad clubhouse culture with the Royals than he did with good clubhouse culture with the Royals. And he's been talking about culture. We're building a foundation. And Keenan Middleton took a grenade, tossed it into that, and blew it all up. Nothing is being built. There isn't a clubhouse culture. If there is, it is chaos and one that everybody hates each other and can't wait to get out of it. Grifol, to me, this is so damning. He probably should be one and done. Like, logically speaking, Jim, I get that he's probably not one and done if Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams continue to have their job. But if anybody else comes in, I'm sorry, Pedro, this is definitely one and done. This has been such a disastrous start for a brand new manager. I don't recall anyone else in recent years, Jim, a brand new manager continuing to step on the rakes like Pedro Grifol has, and now things just quickly unraveling.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm thinking like Jace Tingler in San Diego had a little bit of that, like had no major league experience, was seen as like AJ Preller's guy. Eric Hosmer in like some segments of the clubhouse started turning on him and didn't think like he had like a control of the clubhouse. There was infighting and such. So a little bit of that, maybe not as immediate as Grifol, but same idea. And that's like one of the, I guess, concerns I had about hiring Grifol at this time with no major league experience, with like no obvious connection to like a premier franchise who could like, oh yeah, I understand his reputation around the league is sterling because he's part of this machine that can't lose. Like he's part of the Royals. He's never played in the big leagues. Like he's never really had a prominent role. anywhere. So like that was my concern, is like if it goes south, like watching, or I guess trying to like piece together how the White Sox finished 500 under Tony La Russa. I imagine a lot of like La Russa's reputation helped. Whether it's his ability to, create conflict or manage conflict when it's needed, when he had the energy to do so, but also just like realizing like, hey, he's a Hall of Famer. There is probably a base level respect that they had for him, or they had for players who had respect for him, like Lance Lynn. And that's just not there for Grifol. So the mailing it in can commence. But it's just, I think the Tim Anderson fight, like him saying nothing, and I keep coming back to that, like Jesse Rogers on, was it Mully and Haw? No, it was Captain J Hood on ESPN. Like he was talking about just trying to piece together like the Zapruder film of recent White Sox Guardians games, and saw that like Josh Naylor was mocking Jake Berger. So like Anderson got into it with Naylor, like defending Jake Berger. And so like there was some give and take between Anderson and the Guardians, and the Guardians were giving it to him or giving to the White Sox and Anderson. So I mean, like the Guardians weren't completely blameless, like the way they presented it after the brawl, like, oh yeah, he's just, Anderson's a loose cannon. He's just on the field, ignoring all decorum, and he's getting in the way of us providing for our families. And like, that's their right to do that. That's their right to like basically be defense lawyers and present a very compelling character assassination against Anderson. But like, if this is an ongoing thing where these two teams don't like each other, and Josh Naylor, who is a known instigator, is irritating the White Sox, like you could say, yeah, I mean, their guys do the same thing. So like, all Grifol to say is like, Guardians are no angels. Josh Naylor's been doing the same thing. They give it to us, we give it back. Like they didn't like it. Like, they can tow it down themselves too. Like there's a way to do it without saying like, Anderson's in the right here. Anderson should have dropped his gloves, but like he presented no case to his team. Like silence. Yeah, I don't think silence was an option there. Silence certainly is an option here, because if the White Sox are quiet about it, like basically just verifies Middleton's comments of just them being kind of feckless when it comes to their ability to manage conflict. And yeah, I mean, like Rick Hahn took umbrage at John Heyman for saying Grifol could be one and done. But I mean, like there is nothing here in terms of, success, leadership, personality. As I mentioned, like just, we don't have a sense of the person to be invested in him as a human. Like he's just there. He's furniture.
Yeah, I guess we're getting quotes now coming in on Twitter. Again, your lineup tonight, Grandal and Anderson are both in the lineup. Tim Anderson will be batting leadoff at shortstop. Yasmani Grandal batting seventh at catcher. My guy, Elvis Andrus, batting ninth at second base. So we're waiting. We're waiting to see on some of these quotes. And again, you mentioned Jose Ramirez, and Ramirez did have a statement that he prepared today that was released. And what Ramirez said in the statement: in the light of the recent events, I want to say to the public that I deeply regret what happened between me and Tim Anderson, whom I consider a very good baseball player. I've been trying to reach out to him directly and apologize, but haven't received an answer. Everyone who knows me knows well I'm not somebody who's out there looking for trouble. It's been part of my personality and behavior to give 100% every day at the field to help my team and try to be an example for the younger players on my team. I want to reiterate apologies for my behavior, and as always, my goal is to help my team win and reach the postseason. I want to thank everybody in my organization, my teammates, and all my fans for their support during the process. So again, the dichotomy between what Jose Ramirez is putting out in the public, either through interviews that are in Spanish and later translated into English, or now these prepared statements, is vastly different than what Tim Anderson has been putting out. And it sounds like Ramirez is trying to reach out to Anderson, and Anderson is not returning calls or text messages. So again, I'm trying to find this quote because I guess people are in the comments section right now are saying that there's Yasmani Grandal quotes, and I'm trying to find where they are.
Scott Greger had a video, and then like he followed up with a tweet saying Yasmani Grandal says if games were 7 innings, White Sox would be in first place.
What?
You said, yeah. And, Gregor follows up by saying, Grandal says loss of all-star closer Liam Hendricks has been, quote, huge, and unquote. And like, to me, is that a shot at Middleton? Like,
I mean, it's a shot at Middleton. It's a shot at Graveman. It's a shot at Santos. It's a shot at Bummer. It's a shot at everyone in that bullpen because everyone's pitched after the 7th inning. Yaz.
Yeah. that's me is like, was he trying to fire back at Middleton and just threw his entire pitching staff under the bus? Like,
what? Okay, so I don't think Yaz is going to last the entire season. I think at some point that he's going to be DFA'd. But back to your point about Grifol not wanting or not defending Tim Anderson, I'm adding the want. What if, with everything that's transpired so far, that it's not working between Grifol and Anderson? And in order for Grifol's ways to work, in order for him to establish his culture and his foundation, he needs Anderson out. What if that's the case? And what if he's not willing to defend Anderson or go too deep publicly regarding that?
I would maybe give that some credence if Grifol had said anything interesting ever. Like, it's hard to say point. Like he's withholding some awesome thing he could say that would completely, boost confidence in his leadership and such. Like, there's just no evidence that like he has the capability to go rhetorically toe to toe with Terry Francona and just in a he said type argument and kind of lobbying through the media for your team's side. Like, he just hasn't done any of that. So like, I can't all of a sudden say like, he's doing this strategically, because maybe he is. Like, he could be right, but like I want to see some evidence that he can hold court in a way that is inspiring in any way, or like kind of motivating, or connects with fans and the public, and even not even fans, but just like the baseball media in any way, before like thinking like that he has the ability to then not do that on purpose.
Right. So the more I think about Tim Anderson and this whole situation, are there similarities to the Chris Sale tenure with the White Sox that started rocky, but not for off the field issues or tragic events like it did for Tim Anderson with Chris Sale? Chris Sale butted heads like almost immediately with the White Sox front office about the whole bullpen situation. Like, Sale took it in stride in 2012 because he just got like drafted and now he's into the major leagues, but the White Sox were toying with the idea of moving Sale back to the bullpen, and Sale had to pick up the phone and scream at Kenny Williams, and based on Kenny Williams getting screamed at by Chris Sale, convinced Kenny Williams, you know what, he does have the fire and the passion to be a starting pitcher. Let's keep him into
Chris Sale, I love it.
Yes.
Like, that's the Will Ferrell bad boss thing.
Yep.
Like, he loves direct confrontation. Just taking shirts off and like slamming chests together.
In order for the White Sox rebuild, or for them to rebuild and get out of this cycle of mediocre baseball that they have been stuck in, they decided that they needed to part ways with Chris Sale, who put up some of the best individual seasons by a White Sox starting pitcher ever in franchise history. Might have been the most talented, especially during his prime, starting pitcher for the Chicago White Sox we have seen. Like, nobody has really, I think, rise to that level that Chris Sale was, especially in the middle of the 2010s. So the White Sox made that decision. In order for them to rebuild and start anew, they had to move Chris Sale. In order for the White Sox to move on and to rebuild or reload, obviously it's easy with Yasmani Grandal. He's a free agent after this year. He's gone. Do they have to move on from Tim Anderson, Jim?
Depends on what their aspirations are for 2024. I was thinking 2014 with Chris Sale. Yeah, and also depending on like moving on, does moving on mean not exercising his option, or exercising his option and then seeing how the market plays out with like anybody wanting to, take the White Sox up on a trade just for something? Because like moving on from Chris Sale was easy because of the return that he brought and the way it was able to start a rebuild and restock the farm system and such. Like, Anderson doesn't have that going for him. Like he doesn't have the value that all of a sudden makes it easy to turn the page. Like he would just be gone. The White Sox wouldn't benefit from either, in terms of like adding personnel. Like there's no people coming in with Anderson going out. It'd just be him leaving and hoping for addition by subtraction. So that's kind of like what I think the differences between the two, and also just who's in charge after this. Like, let
me bring up that banner. This banner will always stay in our StreamYard. Who is in charge for the Chicago White Sox?
Yeah, the people in charge.
We're going to be getting quotes here. Rick Hahn is currently speaking right now. Does not look like there's a live stream, but it is being videotaped by the TV stations based on the photo that the Athletic John Greenberg has provided. So we may be getting some quotes here. Yasmani Grandal did speak to the media. Vinny Duber of CHGO tweeted, Grandal spoke to the media saying he wanted to do so as a team veteran so young guys didn't have to speak to the media. He called the report of his physical altercation with Tim Anderson, quote, not real, end quote. So now we're having the battle of words, battle of information between Grandal and what again was reported by Shane Reardon of 670 The Score and the Parkins and Spiegel show that Yasmani Grandal and Tim Anderson fought in the clubhouse. And I guess we're waiting on like the first couple of quotes here from Rick Hahn. I don't know. There's nothing that Rick Hahn could say that will put me at ease. Is there anything that he would say that puts you at ease, Jim?
Not really. Just kind of, like I think maybe the most telling moment to me in terms of Hahn and his like the way he interacts and like his motive speak with the media is when like he was trying to like put out the flames from the Mike Clevenger investigation, and like there was just so much silence. Like he didn't have anything to say, and he just kind of looked down a lot. And if somebody asked him a pointed follow-up question that is his first manner of escaping didn't work, then like he just took a lot of time before saying something. So like to me it's more along lines of like the notes he's not playing, what he's not saying, in order to understand like exactly like what tone he's trying to what the seriousness he's trying to convey. Because I think like if he just talks and filibusters, like that's just going to feel like he's on autopilot, because that's what he does.
Yeah, stand by here. I'm going to try a new feature with our streaming platform that'll allow me to capture as far as audio from Rick Hahn's first 2 minutes of his press conference here that we can all while I'm currently working on that. Again, if you just joined us, welcome. I'm Josh Nelson alongside Jim Margulis of Sox Machine, as Rick Hahn is currently speaking to the media. Yasmani Grandal spoke to the media not that long ago, saying that the fight that's being reported between him and Tim Anderson was not real, and that if the games were just 7 innings, the Chicago White Sox would be in first place of the American League Central. Maybe that is a dig at Keenan Middleton. It's a dig on a lot of bullpen pitchers for the Chicago White Sox. But let me see if I can get this working. And yeah, let's give this a shot. You could hear this, right, Jim?
About the incident over the
There we go.
weekend in Cleveland. Obviously unfortunate. You never want to see anything like that unfold on a baseball field. We were fortunate nobody was injured on either side, and obviously understand the commissioner's office role in doling out discipline. And at this time, we'll support the process and let it unfold before seeing what is meted out. I will say, which coincidentally goes into the second topic of leadership and clubhouse culture. Team on Saturday and Sunday rally around each other. You saw individual examples of leadership such as that from Andrew Vaughn and University as a unit, and came away with 2 victories that was hopefully something to build upon. Obviously, late last night, early this morning, there were reports from a former player criticizing some elements of our culture. I will get at that in a moment. Those specific comments. But first, I think it's important to note that for the past month, you've heard that we realized we had a cultural problem, had a group that was all pulling in the same direction, that was necessarily supporting each other or going about their business the way that we had wanted this to. Something that we feel we've been in the process of addressing, both at the trade deadline as well as since, and is something that we expect will continue to improve over the coming weeks.
Okay, so that is the first video clip that we have of Rick Hahn speaking to the media, and he is taking the stance regarding what Keenan Middleton told Jesse Rogers of ESPN.com. Jim, we already talked about this. Mm-hmm. We already told you that we have a clubhouse culture problem. What a weird stance. And honestly, I don't think he was that upfront about it, because if he was upfront about it, we would have been talking about this for a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's Scott Greger with a follow-up tweet saying that Hahn is picking apart Keenan Middleton's published criticism point by point, says Middleton apologized to him before being traded for his, quote, unprofessional behavior, unquote. So now he's attacking Middleton's character, trying to foment doubts about the witness credibility, I think, in this regard. And like, I guess it makes sense as a strategy, but like, yeah, wins don't matter right now. Like him trying to lean on, like, yeah, we really rallied hard, won 2 games against a Cleveland team that's bad, when we're just mailing in the rest of the season, and we're just like, yeah, it's wins don't matter. You can't lean on that. Nobody's happy about the wins. Like in this case, like wins actually hurt in terms of draft standing at this point. Not that everybody's like hoping that the White Sox lose, but just like, it's cold comfort to say like, yeah, we rallied around in, this kind of adversity and won, because like it's 2 games after 110 games that showed that this team does not function. And whatever I guess whatever momentum this creates goes nowhere, because the roster is not ready to contend in 2024. So there's just nothing there. It's not like 2019 where you could see the team starting to come together, and maybe they would have a hot 2 months, and this team looks like it's ready to springboard into the next echelon of major league teams. Like this is, just meaningless at this point, more so than a lot of August and September wins for an also-ran team.
Yeah, the first quote about Middleton apologizing after he got traded, or in the discussion, or being told that he was traded, that he apologized for his unprofessional behavior. That's what Scott Greger tweeted. White Sox GM Rick Hahn picking apart Keenan Middleton's published criticisms point by point, says Middleton apologized to him before being traded to New York for his, quote, unprofessional behavior, end quote. So are you attacking Middleton's character right now? Like,
seems like it.
He's such a lawyer. Like, he's not a baseball GM. Rick Hahn's a lawyer right now. So he's in lawyer mode. The media is his courtroom. So this is like the opening statement to the jury. And he is now picking apart or attempting to attack Keenan Middleton's character. For those that are upset about the clubhouse culture and what is being reported about the White Sox clubhouse culture, the White Sox, in the very few media appearances that Rick Hahn has had in the last month, I may add, done a poor job in being transparent and honest about the clubhouse culture, even though Rick Hahn is saying that they were. I'm sorry. That's the first comment that I take aback to, Jim. Mm-hmm. We would have been talking about this for a month. You were not that transparent about the issues that were in the clubhouse. We did not know that there was a culture problem. All we kept hearing from your manager is that you are building a culture, and we have used that as a laugh track watching the team on the field. He's in lawyer mode right now, and that might be more the quotes. But again, we cover everything at the Chicago White Sox. We watch the White Sox, so you guys don't have to. So we'll be covering all this, but it's such an interesting angle as a GM. Yes, we have a clubhouse culture problem. We've known about it for a while. We try to unload some guys at the trade deadline that maybe didn't mesh to the clubhouse. We still have a clubhouse issue. We're going to be addressing this in the offseason. And to our friend Shane Harmon, all the way down in New Zealand, he tweeted this at me this morning when he was catching up to the news. And he made a very good point, Jim. What free agent wants to sign with the Chicago White Sox after this? Like, doesn't matter how much money Jerry Reinsdorf's willing to spend. The quality of free agents. What good or great baseball player wants to play for this franchise right now?
Yeah, this is money talks to a certain extent. And so if the White Sox actually pony up, usually that's Zach Wheeler's side. That's enough to determine where a player goes. So there is a risk of overstating that. But with the way the White Sox are kind of, spreading across baseball, now this clubhouse is, being broken apart and just being dispersed everywhere across the league. That is, I guess, the express lane to just getting a bad reputation. If Giolito's in Anaheim and Lynn and Kelly are in Los Angeles and Graven's with Houston and Middleton's in New York, and just all these guys are saying I'm so glad I'm here. You'll never believe what it was like there. You'll never believe what it was like dealing with. Yeah, the White Sox never seem to surface on those player surveys of where favorite front offices, least favorite front offices, managers, and such, because most people just don't think about them to where it's usually Cubs, Yankees, Mets, etc. The teams that draw a lot of opinions. The White Sox typically don't. This could be a case where just there might be enough written about the White Sox and said about the White Sox behind closed doors and in group texts and such to where you might see them sneak up the unpopular ratings on these player surveys because of just who's doing the talking. And just when one speaks, then you have Lynn saying, that's kind of what it's like. And then there might Lucas Giolito might not say something, but he might smirk in a way that everybody sees him agreeing. It's going to be fascinating to see just how Hahn can say to the media and kind of try to undermine Middleton's credibility or whatnot, but it's going to keep going. It's going to be a little bit like a wildfire in terms of all it takes is one ember going loose and dropping on the right leaf to set another blaze that he might have to put out, or he just might give up putting out and just let it spread.
Well, to that point, I think that's a good place to end here. Again, the White Sox and Yankees are going to be playing tonight. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central Time. Dylan Cease is on the mound for the Chicago White Sox. It will not be an easy game for the White Sox. Garrett Cole is making the start for the New York Yankees. Both Tim Anderson and Yasmani Grandal are in the lineup. So there's going to be a lot of attention. Let's see on how many camera shots that we get from NBC Sports Chicago, if they're allowed to, that show any interaction between Anderson and Grandal, and we'll see in how the Chicago White Sox fare. It's a mess, folks, and it continues to get messier by the hour. Again, Rick Hahn is currently speaking to the media. We'll be hearing from Pedro Grifol soon. Pedro Grifol has been suspended for a game, so he may not be managing tonight. It might be Charlie Montoyo who will be managing for the Chicago White Sox, as managers cannot appeal their suspensions. So it looks like Grifol may be getting the night off anyways, which makes him more available to speak to the media and say nothing at all, even though his clubhouse and the way that he's been managing things has been under attack.
Yeah, I might have to watch the Yes broadcast tonight, because I imagine what Jason Benetti and Steve Stone will be talking about will be a lot different from what Michael Kay and whoever is the guest analyst for the Yankees will be talking about. So I think I'll be watching that, because their camera work can be pretty good when they're talking about that kind of stuff and what they follow. Kay, he's a sports radio host, so he's used to knowing what is fun to talk about or what gets reactions or draws attention. So I think I might have to watch that one tonight. And people can fill me in. Like, I'd appreciate it. Like, if you're watching the White Sox broadcast, if like Benetti and Stone say something interesting that I might need to know about for writing or whatnot, please let me know, because I think I'll be watching the Yes broadcast and relaying what I pick up there for people who are stuck on the NBC Sports Chicago one.
And I'll be giving a standing ovation to Keenan Middleton if he enters tonight's game. One news item from the Yankee side: old friend Carlos Rodon has been placed on the injured list with a injured hamstring. We weren't going to be seeing him anyways, but that's another. It just dawned on me. If Rodon made the trip, that is another ex-White Sox player that New York media could put the microphone in front of. And Rodon can share his insight and his time with the White Sox, and that does span the 2016 season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although like he has his hands full with dissatisfaction among Yankees fans, so probably like they probably don't want to have him talking right now.
Yeah, I get that, but New York media, they're chasing a story, and this is becoming a national story. And what is going on in 35th and Shields? Everyone has been talking about it. Even Chicago media folks can hop over to the other clubhouse. Again, that's if Carlos Rodon made the trip from New York to Chicago for this series, even though Rodon is now on the injured list. But I really appreciate everybody hopping into this special edition of Sox Machine Live as we try some new tools here and got through some technical difficulties. So thank you guys for doing so along with us. If you just discovered Sox Machine, you can follow us on Twitter and on other social media platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads at SoxMachine_Josh. If this is the first time you're watching a Sox Machine video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. And we do take the audio from our Sox Machine Live streams and upload them into the podcast feed, which you can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. And if you enjoy our work and you want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Sox Machine. And thanks to our Patreon support, it's keeping Jim and I sane enough to cover the mess that is the Chicago White Sox. So we love you guys. Thank you so much for your help over the years. Monthly plans start at $2, and you get exclusive content and ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. Again, you can sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Sox Machine Live is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball, and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for watching and listening.